What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A04s and the Motorola Moto G Pure. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz PLS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the Moto G Pure, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display. This phone also has a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. So, in general, these phones have essentially the same display. They have the same size, same form factor. They both have 720p resolutions that, despite only being 720p, do look at least decently nice. So, overall, you're really not going to see a significant difference between the two. That being said, for more entry-level devices, the displays we're getting here are pretty good. So if you're doing stuff like browsing the web, using social media, and watching videos, despite of course not being the most amazing displays out there, with these phones, you will get a pretty good experience. Really, the only difference here is that with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, with the 90Hz refresh rate versus a standard 60Hz with the Moto G Pure, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel a bit more premium to use. But honestly, in the grand scheme of things, this is really not that big a difference. So again, in general, if you are looking for a more entry-level phone and you want to make sure you have a decently nice display, you won't go wrong with either phone here. Now for storage, with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, this phone is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Moto G Pure, this phone is getting 32 with microSD card expansion as well. So clearly here, the Samsung Galaxy A04s, having doubled the storage, does have quite an advantage here. Whereas with the Moto G Pure, at only 32GB, I feel like for most people, this is probably not going to be enough storage. I mean, sure, it does get microSD card expansion at least, like pretty much every other phone, but if you're someone who's constantly downloading stuff like apps, you are still going to want more internal storage than this. So if that is you, then between the two, the A04s will be a much better choice. But keep in mind, with the A04s, this phone is not officially launched in the US, so if you get it, you will have to get it factory unlocked, which granted, it's not really that expensive, but still. With the Moto G Pure, I have seen several deals where you can get this phone for free through various different carriers. So if that is important to you, then definitely keep this in mind. But in general, again, when it comes to the storage, the A04s definitely has a huge advantage. For security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners. With the Samsung Galaxy A04s, it's right here on the power key, and with the Moto G Pure, it's right here on the back. But starting with the A04s, let's give them a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. And now for the Moto G Pure. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well. No issues at all. And again, both phones do have Face Unlock too. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, up front we got a 5-megapixel selfie camera, then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50-megapixel main camera, a 2-megapixel macro camera, and a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Moto G Pure, up front, just like the A04s, we got another 5-megapixel selfie camera, then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 13-megapixel main camera and a 2-megapixel depth sensing camera. So as far as features go, for being more entry-level devices, both phones do have pretty decent camera setups here. But that being said, with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, again, we do get a macro camera, whereas unfortunately the Moto G Pure does not have that feature. So if you want to get those close-up detailed images, you might want to go with the A04s. Now when it comes to photo quality, on one hand, the Moto G Pure is definitely not bad, and for more casual use, it definitely will get the job done. That being said though, the photo quality with the A04s is significantly better. I mean, that's probably not surprising considering this phone has a 50-megapixel camera, but just keep in mind, if you are taking a lot of photos, and that's more of an important thing for you, then you will get a better experience with the Samsung Galaxy A04s. But on the other hand, if you're more of a casual camera user and you're really not taking that many photos, then keep in mind, the photo quality we get with the Moto G Pure is still at least okay, and for a more light user, it will at least get the job done. To give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A04s. Definitely some real nice pictures here. So if you are looking for a more affordable device, but maybe you're taking a lot of pictures for say Instagram for example, where you really want things to look presentable, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is going to be a great choice because again, despite being a really cheap, affordable phone, the camera quality as you can see is really good. Now here's some pictures taken with the Moto G Pure, and again, on one hand, they're definitely not terrible, and in a lot of real life situations, like maybe you're using Snapchat for example, where the quality isn't super important, or even the occasional Instagram photo every now and then, for that kind of stuff, this phone will get the job done, but just between the two, as you can probably tell, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is still significantly better. So overall, I would say if you're really not a very heavy camera user and you're really just taking a couple photos every now and then, the Moto G Pure is still going to be perfectly fine. But on the other hand, if you really do like to get a lot of nice photos, you are going to be much better off with the Samsung Galaxy A04s. When it comes to RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the Exynos 850 processor. With the Moto G Pure, this phone has 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25. Now, between the two, neither phone is particularly fast, but I will say the Samsung Galaxy A04s is still significantly faster. Sure, you're not going to be doing any heavy activities on this phone either, but if you're doing stuff like web browsing, social media, watching videos, and things like that, your experience overall with the A04s is going to be a little bit nicer and smoother, whereas with the Moto G Pure, for the same kind of activities, it can get the job done, but at the same time, keep in mind this phone is quite a bit slower. In fact, even for more of a lower end device, this is definitely one of the slower ones in general. So on one hand, if you're not really that concerned about performance at all, this is probably not going to matter, but still keep in mind, between the two, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is still noticeably faster. Now, I did run benchmark tests on both phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So yeah, again, definitely between the two, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is the faster phone. So if performance is a bit more important to you, then definitely keep this in mind. For the batteries, with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15W fast charging, and with the Moto G Pure, this phone has a 4000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging. So on one hand, the Moto G Pure doesn't really have a bad battery per se, but on the other hand, the battery life with the Samsung Galaxy A04s is going to be significantly better. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, but you still need something that's really going to last all day, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is definitely going to be a much better choice. But on the other hand, again, the Moto G Pure doesn't really have a bad battery, and if you're not really using your phone too much throughout the day, it is going to be just fine too. For the software, with the Samsung Galaxy A04s, this phone does have Android 13, whereas with the Moto G Pure, depending on your carrier it seems, you are going to get either Android 11 or Android 12. Personally, with this phone in my hand, I do only have Android 11 on this phone, but I think that's more of an AT&T thing because I have seen Moto G Pures that do have Android 12, so I'm going to assume most people who have this phone are going to be getting Android 12, but just know some carriers are a little weird about the updates. But regardless, whether you have Android 11 or Android 12, neither of those is Android 13, and I seriously doubt at this point the Moto G Pure is actually going to get Android 13. So if you do want the latest version of Android and software support is important to you in general, then I would definitely go with the Samsung Galaxy A04s because in addition to having Android 13, with Samsung software support, this phone is also going to get several other major updates in the future. So really, when it comes to software and long-term software support, in this price range, a Samsung phone like this is really one of the best options. Another thing I do want to point out is that unfortunately, neither phone has NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you will have to get something else entirely. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, in some ways, these are pretty similar devices, and if you're looking for a really entry-level, kind of basic device for more light activities like web browsing, social media, and watching the occasional video every now and then especially if you're not too concerned about stuff like performance, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone here. That being said though, in pretty much every way where there's actually a difference, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is a much better device. This phone has double the storage, it is noticeably faster, it has a much better camera, a larger battery, a newer version of Android, and much better long-term software support. So overall between the two, I would definitely say despite being pretty comparable in several different ways, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is a much better phone. That being said though, again, keep in mind, this phone is not officially launched in the US, so if you do want to get it, you are going to have to get it factory unlocked, which is really not that expensive, but at the same time, there are still a couple carriers that do have the Moto G Pure, and oftentimes they do have some really good deals on this phone where you could end up getting it for free. And while I do think some advantages the A04s has are kind of worth the price difference, if you are really looking for something super affordable to do more or less the bare minimum on, then because of the deals you can find for it, the Moto G Pure still might be a better choice for you. But again, if you really want to maximize the features you get for the money, the Samsung Galaxy A04s is definitely a better choice. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A04s and the Motorola Moto G Pure. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone, definitely check out the description where I will be linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipas Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.